So hello and welcome to today's Crossing Borders broadcast brought to you by IMC Streaming. And I'm delighted that today's event is brought to you in association with IIUSA. Our friends there in Washington, good morning. If you're in the USA, good afternoon if you're in Europe, and good evening if you're watching us from Asia. Before we start, as usual, I want to thank you all for joining us on last week's broadcast, which we viewed last Thursday. A recording of that is available through our YouTube channel, so don't forget to hit subscribe, and you can watch on demand the back catalogue of all the IMC streaming broadcasts that we've had for the last 8 weeks. A little bit of housekeeping. Remember, you can ask questions and post comments at any time during today's broadcast. You just need to use the GoToWebinar widget, which is located on the right of your screen. And as usual, we will have we'll have 2 polls today to keep you guys engaged. I'm going to launch the first one just to get us warmed up a little bit. So you should be seeing that on your screens. If you can just submit an answer to us, and that will let us know where you are from. So about 70% of you guys have voted so far. I'll let that run for another 5 seconds. Okay, let's close that and share the results. So you should see the results on your screen. So it's definitely very good morning to 67% of you watching us from the Americas, which could be Canada, could be the United States. You could be all the way down in Argentina, Uruguay, or Paraguay. And then 70% are Europe and Africa, and then it's an equal weighing on Asia Pacific and the Middle East. So that gives today's panelists an indication of where everybody is. I'm going to close that off and just going to share my screen with you so you guys can see. There we go. All right. So today's Crossing Borders, we'll be discussing the current EB5 regulations, paying particular attention to the required investment amounts, and we'll also touch upon President Trump's executive order, which in effect suspended immigration with a caveat exempting EB5 and non-immigrant visas. Now that was rolled out, I think probably about 2 weeks ago now. So probably that's settled a little bit, and it'll be interesting to hear what's been happening in that front. Of course, we do know that there are many high net worth individuals who desire to enter the US very quickly, and today's panelists will discuss the various timelines for visa entries into the United States and the concurrent EB5 process. Then also based upon the economic downturn, and we know that there is a closure of many US businesses, including in the construction sector. We'll also address the due diligence of the business viability of future EB5 project infrastructures as the economy returns. Equally important, there will also be discussions on due diligence and the lawful source transfer of investor funds. And the panel will provide an overview of the reason why many high net worth individuals continue to trade and invest in the US. We'll also look at the important discussion of new initiatives regarding the irrevocable commitment of investment funds by the investor, and a discussion on high net worth individuals initially paying a portion of the investment, filing the EB5 petition, and then paying the balance of the required investment amounts in subsequent installments. So that's quite a lot to get through. As usual, we've got 45 minutes, and we have a wonderful panel of experts, which I'm delighted to say that my good friend, member of the IMC's advisory committee, attorney at law, Edward Beshara, has very well put together. And I'm going to hand over the presentation and the floor to Ed, who will introduce the panelists and get the discussion going. So Webb, Ed, it's over to you.
Thank you, Bruno. And Bruno, you're also a good friend and colleague, and we've known each other for a few years now. And I wanted to thank you, Bruno, and the IMC for putting on such a an event. This should be very interesting for the IMC members as well as the attendees. And before we get started, because anytime we talk about foreign nationals, high net worth individuals moving to a country like the US, and we talk about EB5, which is investment to obtain permanent residency, we're also talking about new initiatives, as you said, Bruno. Before anyone invests in the US, a lot of people hear on the news what's going on, but it's essential that anyone investing in the US contact professionals, organizations in the US that can guide them through the process and make sure they make a good decision, a very good decision. So we're going to do this very quickly. We're going to introduce each of the panelists. They're going to tell us very briefly a little bit about who they are, right? Ladies first. Laura, please say who you are, and then we're going to go to Bob, Waleed, and then Byron.
Certainly. Hi, everyone. It's Laura Austin. I lead the due diligence practice as it relates to investment migration at IIUSA, based in New York. Just briefly, I've about 10 years of experience with due diligence as it relates to this industry, with specific focus on citizenship and residency programs. And very recently, I worked with the IMC and the Special Task Force to publish 2 industry reports regarding due diligence best practices within this industry.
Good, thank you. And BDO, you're in New York, Laura, as you said, but BDO is an accounting firm that's global, correct?
Certainly,
yes. Yep. Right, okay. So basically, Bob, who's also a good friend and colleague, please introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Waleed.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Bob Kraft. I'm the chairman, CEO of FirstPathway Partners. We're a regional center based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest. We operate in a number of states nationally. We've been in this business for 12 years, and we're one of the leaders in the country. I also serve as president of IIUSA, which represents the EB5 industry, not just in the United States, but globally.
Good, thank you. But Bob, thank you very much. And it's a credit to you, Bob, that year after year you continue to be the president of IIUSA, and so thank you for all your efforts. Waleed, please introduce yourself. We met each other last year in June. A lot has happened since June, but Waleed, please introduce who you are and who you represent. We can't hear you, Waleed. We cannot hear you. Can you put on the microphone, Waleed? We still cannot hear you. Bruno, can you hear Waleed?
Yeah, no, I can't hear him. He is self-muted.
Yeah, but if you could. Okay, I'll tell you what, Waleed, until you work it out, Byron, are you able to hear us? Byron? Byron, can you hear us? Well, let me introduce, well, we also, Byron Sutton, he's the president of the World Trade Centers of Florida and the committee chairman of the trade markets for the World Trade Center Association USA. Waleed Musa is the world president.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, good. I was just going to introduce you, Waleed, who you are briefly.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good night for everyone, good evening. I'm Waleed Musa from Beirut, from Lebanon. I'm the world president of the International Real Estate Federation, FIAPSI, a global organization, the only real estate federation in the world. We are present in 70 countries around the planet. Our main objective is sharing the best practices and networking. Mainly, we have many categories of membership, but we have all kinds of real estate profession, directly or indirectly. FIAPSI, F-I-A-B-C-I, FIAPSI. As well, I'm the founder president of the FIAPSI Arabic countries, with 8 countries in the Arabic region. At the same time, I'm the real estate, I'm the president of the Real Estate Syndicate of Lebanon, and I do have many kind of activities on a personal level. I'm the owner of a real estate brokerage and management company, property management and investment, an investment company, and mainly my activity is in real estate and the real estate business.
Thank you, Waleed. Thank you very much. And we'll wait for Byron and introduce him, Byron later. But just very briefly myself, I'm an attorney. I was admitted to the bar in Victoria, Australia as a barrister and solicitor. Yes, I did wear a white wig and black gown. And then I came to the US and studied in the US and obtained a US law degree as well. So I've been practicing business immigration law now for 37 years, and I've been practicing EB-5 since the beginning 29 years ago. Past president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Central Florida chapter, still a very active member with IIUSA. I've been on the Compliance Committee, Best Practice Committee, and New Investor Markets. But and I'm also an adjunct professor of business immigration law at the University of Florida Law School. But we need to get on to the various topics. And Bruno, we're going to go to slide, I believe, slide 4. So, and I'm going to ask this question, and starting off with Bob. You know, right now we've gone through the pandemic. Someone's got their microphone open, but we have a lot of noise in the background. If they could mute their microphone, please. Right now, a lot of people are thinking, well, where should I invest? High net worth individuals. Bruno, I think it's the slide before that. Slide 4. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So a lot of people are thinking, where should they invest? You know, there's many countries to choose from, but as far as the US is concerned, you know, we want foreign national investors to realize that basically that the US is back to doing business, right? And I would like to hear from Bob as, you know, what is the state of the economy, and very briefly, what are the economic structures that we have that would allow an investor to make a good decision to invest in the US? What does the US offer to attract investors, Bob?
Yeah, I think to begin with, the US is the largest economy in the world. And in spite of what's happening right now with the COVID-19 issue, we still remain pretty good shape. The reports that are coming out now seem to be heading in the direction of rapidly reopening. Most of the states are in the process of doing so. And although the unemployment rate has spiked up significantly, real estate prices have stayed pretty stable. They've dropped a little bit in some of the major markets, but they'll be back. The stock market continues to be fairly strong. And the government has done a good job of stepping in and propping up, protecting the people. and our healthcare system has done a really good job of dealing with this pandemic. We actually thought for a while maybe we would stretch it from a capacity standpoint, but as this thing unfolded and the healthcare professionals got their arms around it, we really have a lot of excess capacity. So from a security safety standpoint, both for personal life and situation, along with economic, it's still a very, very safe bet, and it's a very great place to live for sure. So I'd encourage people to continue to think about the United States, and we're going to get out of this. The world's starting to reopen, which is a really good sign, and hopefully we've all learned a lot from this and how to handle it if it comes back in the future or something else does.
Right, and thank you, Bob. And you know, of course, the legal and the business infrastructures haven't gone away because of the pandemic. They're still in place, and I think a lot of the high net worth individuals, foreign nationals, can rely on the US existing structures that will protect a business, that will protect them from any type of you know, future endeavors that they may have doubts about. But Byron, I'd like you to comment, and using Florida as an example, you know, where do we see the future for Florida? But very briefly, please, Byron. Well, we'll wait for Byron to come back. But a lot of people are thinking about investing in real estate globally. But in the US, there's also a real estate market, and a lot of people invest in products like real estate first, and then they use those real estate transactions, for example, to use the real estate as a source of personal income that they can then invest in businesses such as in the US businesses. Waleed, very briefly, what is the state of the real estate purchases that you know of in the US?
Well, actually, I'd like to start to talk about the global, what's happening globally. Now people are in a pending mode, waiting situation to be clearer. There's no doubt that the real estate sector in the US is a very important sector and a very attractive investment for investors that wants secure investment and a steady investment. At the same time, what I can tell you that international investors will now be waiting the American market to be more flexible. You know, in terms of real estate, there's an old quote that says, when there's blood, buy real estate. And now, in the middle of this battle, and this is the middle of this war, it could be the right time to negotiate, to buy some properties on the market that have been unaffordable, and now that became affordable to buy and lucrative. So from the perspective of from the international investors, I think that now there is a momentum to invest in real estate in the United States. But still, we have to wait a little bit to have a clearer image about what's going to happen and how flexible the prices or the markets will be. But I am positive that it is an opportunity now to invest and to be present in the US market.
Thank you, Willie. Laura, you know, and Bob and I know that in the EB5 world, that the EB5 amount has increased, right, from 500,000 to 900,000, depending on the geographical areas, or 1.8 million. Is it important that before the investor sources, for example, from real estate, sources their personal income for the investment, that they talk to someone like yourself to make a decision as to whether it's the best source to obtain the funds, and they also have to authenticate the lawful source? So I know you play a role in that. How important is that for the investor to deal with a professional firm such as yours to make sure that they're on the right track?
Sure. I mean, I think pre-transactional, regardless of the type of transaction, pre-transactional due diligence is extremely important in terms of mitigating risk. And I think certainly, we do play a role when it comes to verifying source of funds and source of wealth. But for the investors, we also have real estate valuation practices, which specialize in the valuation and analysis of a broad range of real property assets. And what they do is they really provide transaction support to parties contemplated or involved in some sort of acquisition, whether it be real estate or some other type of acquisition, but also in terms of business investments. And it really is important in terms of protecting themselves, that they know who they're engaging with, who they're handing their money over to. And that's certainly something that we could assist with.
Good, thank you, Laura. The president, came out with an executive order a few weeks ago that said he wants to suspend immigration because he wants to protect the US workforce. Then the day after that, he said that, we're suspending immigration to the US. However, the category that's exempt from suspension is EB-5, right? And non-immigrant visas. So if someone is going through a process outside the US to apply for conditional permanent residency based upon an EB-5 investment, they can still continue to do so as soon as the US consulates open, which is great, because the whole idea of EB-5 is to create US jobs, making an investment, create US jobs. So it does go hand in hand with this approach by the president that he wants to protect US jobs. But I think we need trade, we need investment from foreign national investors to make sure that the economy is sustained. We can do that. The economy is open for high net worth individuals. But let's go to the next slide, Bruno, if you don't mind, slide 5, because I want to get to Bob. Thank you. So Bob, we've been looking at EB-5 for many years, right? And we're to come to, some of the nuances of EB-5 today. But if EB-5 is taking a couple of years to obtain that conditional residency, a lot of the high net worth individuals today, because they're coming from certain economies, that they may not want to stay, they may want to decide on going to a new place. But there are other vehicles, there are other options that the high net worth individuals can invest in certain types of businesses where they, instead of waiting maybe 2 years, they may only have to wait a few months. Bob, what do you see in the EB-5 world as, how does the EB-5 world work with high net worth individuals still wanting to come in quickly in a few months? And we could be talking about the E2 visa. So explain what you see in the E2 arena right now and how that goes hand in hand with EB-5.
Well, the E2 visa has been around for a long time, and it's a very popular, but it hasn't been utilized for in a large way for investment programs in the United States in order to gain quick access until recently, because of the countries that have been retrogressed around the world, backlog basically because of availability or lack of availability for those countries. E2's become a very interesting way to gain access quickly. People can apply for an E2 visa, and companies like ours that package programs that meet all the government requirements can actually be in the United States within a matter of months under a visa. Does not lead to a permanent green card, but they can begin working, going to school, taking advantage of all the benefits of being in America, and then concurrently apply for an EB-5, which may take a matter of a few years, and then have a permanent green card. So it's a very interesting workaround, if you will, if access to the United States sooner rather than later is of importance to them.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And just as we see on the slide, high net worth individuals can individually invest in a US business or franchise or set up their own and obtain, as Bob said, an E2 in a matter of months, come to the US. If they're not a citizen of a country that has an E2 treaty with the US, then they could get second citizenship. I know the IMC talks about second citizenship in countries like Turkey and Grenada, for example, where in a couple of months you get that second citizenship and then apply for the E2. So in a matter of a few months, you're in the US, operating a business. The other way where you've got besides high net worth individuals, you have companies in other countries that may say, look, we want to transfer our personnel into the US. We want to buy businesses in the US. We want to set up our own business in the US, and that's called the L1, intra-company transfer. So if we're looking at E2 to EB5, E2 temporary, EB5 permanent, and then we're looking at L1s, intra-companies, in a couple of months, getting a visa to come to run a business in the US as an executive, and then using that US business to petition for them for the green card. Laura, your company deals with many multinational corporations, and then they may want to set up their own subsidiary in the US or set up a way of coming into the US for their executives by buying existing businesses. What due diligence should be followed in deciding whether the US business setup or the US business is the right business for not only business activity and financial strength, but what do you do to help multinationals making that decision?
Sure. So in this type of proposed transaction, the due diligence would really be multifaceted and then scaled based on the risks inherent to the specific situation. To start at the more basic level, it would be research on the company and the individuals that are in those leadership positions. And really the goal of this type of due diligence would be to develop information regarding the background, the track record, the reputation, all of those service level risks that you could easily identify. But then the second tier, the second level of this would really be encompassing sector dynamics, things that could impact the acquisition, geopolitical issues, and we would really be looking to uncover things like potential inflation of the pre-acquisition conditions, unofficial stakeholders in the company, potential corruption, questionable relationships, things of that nature that dig a little bit deeper to the risk that may not be surface level, but would be very, very important to a company that was investing in another company here. So certainly a multifaceted approach, but definitely something that we would recommend to do due diligence prior to an acquisition of this nature.
Good. So just before we leave this, and then I'm going to get to Waleed in a second. So if someone wants to quickly get into the US, as Bob said, they can acquire the E2 visa, and then they get the E2 status to come into the US. Each entry, they're allowed to stay for 2 years, but the visa itself can be extended without limitation. And then if they invest more money into the existing E2 business or a subsequent business, well, then they can lead to a permanent residency in the US and going from E2 to EB5, getting credit sometimes for the E2 investment they've already made. So if they've made a $600,000 investment in E2 and they're in a geographical area where it's a target employment area, which allows them to make a $900,000 investment, then they have to come up with $300,000. They file the EB5 petition, and then they're able to stay. Once they get their EB5 approved, then they're staying as a resident, as a conditional resident. L1, same thing. You invest in a existing US business or you set up your own, and that US business will petition for that executive for residency. And it could be, the CEO, it could be the vice president, it could be a number of executives under that one US company obtaining their residency very quickly as well. First coming in under the L1, which is a temporary visa, and then converting that to a EB1C, multinational executive. So you've got individuals, high net worth individuals investing in US businesses, and you've got foreign corporations, parent companies investing in US businesses as well. Waleed, globally and even in the US, high net worth individuals investing in real estate as an investment, as a vehicle to make money, right? Not just to live in, but to make money. Is that happening?
Is that happening or happened?
Happened and will continue to happen.
Well, again, we're gonna turn around the same idea and say that it's the right moment to do it, because the people that have invested in real estate around 2009, 2010 are the people in the crisis, are the people that really made money during the last year. If you compare the prices that those people have purchased their properties in the US and the real value of their properties a few months back, you can see that there was a huge benefit investing in real estate in the United States. So now that we are in a different kind of crisis, not related to real estate, but at the end it is a crisis, I think that it's the right time to be back in the real estate in the United States, invest and make money in a few years. That's in my opinion, that's a guaranteed scenario.
Good, thank you, Willie. Byron, are you able to hear us at all? Are you able to get on? I don't know, I think we've lost Byron. But Bruno, can we go to slide 8, please? Okay, thank you. So what we've been talking about is EB5, high net worth individuals investing in a project or businesses. And then based upon their investment, personal investment. Slide 8, Bruno. There you go. That's it. Thank you. And based upon an EB5 investment, investing either $900,000 today or investing 1.8 million, depending on the geographical area. Because if it's in a target employment area, unemployment, or rural area, then it's a $900,000 investment. If it's not, then it's 1.8. So investing in a business or project could be managed by an operator or a developer, and can invest in these what are called regional center projects. For example, you walk away and you are passively involved in a little bit of the management, but that investment that could be managed by one of Bob's projects will get you a green card, but your money's going to be tied up for several years, and you're going to be looked after by a good company. Let's say, for example, Bob Kraft's regional center projects. And if you want to do that, you can. As a high net worth individual, you don't want to really be involved. You just want to be able to wait for a couple of years and get your residency that way. That's EB5. But and also we talked about E2, where you quickly want to come in and you want to yourself be involved in the management of the business. Or L1, you quickly want to get into the US and be involved in the management, and then the L1 and E2 can lead to permanent residency. But it's also important, and I want to ask Laura and Bob, before we talk about different strategies, is that if any individual is coming in that, besides the investor that does EB5, that invested in regional center EB5 project, as I said, that's managed by people that know how to manage and US businesses. But if people are coming in to want to manage their own business, right, whether it's E2 or whether it's L1, and it could and it could be disheartening because you're coming into a new country, right? So if someone's coming into a new country like the US, and even though we've got wonderful legal and business structures, Bob, how do you advise? What can you do to help these high net worth individuals that want to come in and invest in, say, an E2 business, as an example, or L1? What can you do, and how would you help them get acclimatized or get accustomed to operating in the US business?
Well, it's a good question. It's an important one. So I've been doing business internationally for over 40 years, and I would never assume that I could go to Lebanon or some other country where I really don't know how things operate there and successfully run a business. So the best investment, in my opinion, is a passive investment where the investment qualifies for E2 or EB5, but it's really run by people that understand the business and have a track record. So that's why on the E2 program, we've developed a relationship with a franchise operation with a long history that's been very successful. So they can be as involved as they'd like to be. They fully qualify for E2 or EB5. And yet they don't have to actively worry about hiring people, running the business, that type of thing, being up to speed with respect to laws in the United States and the county, the city, the state that you operate in. Everything's a little bit differently. Then you throw in the cultural aspects of how business gets done here. It's like any other country anywhere in the world. Their customs and different practices. So that's the best way to go about it. Have it professionally run. It's a good investment for the investor long term. And as Waleed mentioned, if there's a real estate component, like after the 2008 financial meltdown, the investors that came in soon after that really benefited as the economy came back. We're going to see the same thing after this period.
And Laura, you know, again, it goes back to due diligence, etc. Is it wise for anyone, as you know, Bob and I just alluded to, is it wise for anyone just to come into the US, set up a US operation without guidance, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely think guidance, and it really points to the importance of having the right advisors at hand, knowing the right people to go to and the right people that can help you sort of navigate the market, do the market research. You know, if you're going to do the passive investment, like Bob mentioned, you would want to do some due diligence, at least on the people that were overseeing the business, to ensure that, you know, your investment is a good investment and that there's viability to that. So no, certainly, I mean, I think at any business venture, seeking out the right experts that can help you navigate is the best way to do it, but due diligence should always be a part of that.
Good. And Bob, EB5 is still alive though. You know, like people want to still come in and invest in EB5 projects, but you know, a lot of the EB5 projects are under a regional center model where they invest their money, but they leave it up to, you know, someone like yourself, where you have companies that have the experience to manage, right, these projects, correct?
Yeah, and in fact, the EB5 program, the IIUSA and the regional center operators are in dialogue with the White House and leaders in the Senate and the House to utilize EB5 as a way to help the economy get back on its feet. It was very helpful after the 2008 financial crisis, created hundreds of thousands of jobs, and we've been asked to put together a improvement for the program, which will make it easier for people to qualify faster and to bring capital in that is free to the United States, but it complements what the government wants to do, which is to get the economy going again, create jobs, protect jobs. So we feel we're going to be part of the solution going forward, which is a good thing for investors from around the world.
Right, because I think that, you know, high net worth individuals wanting to invest in the US, if they do EB5 and they do it in a passive way, yes, they can still get their residency, as Bob just said, and Laura. But if they want to be more involved and quickly involved in a US business, they can do E2 or L1. Now, Waleed, when you have people from around the world wanting to invest in real estate, and we see in the US that people can invest in real estate, in townhomes and you know, apartments, condos, and a lot of them do that for investment reasons, you know, not just to live in the houses. But also under EB5, for example, you could have developers developing a real estate project. It's a real estate development, multiple homes being built, or condos, townhomes. They invest in the project that is developing, that's constructing all these townhomes, etc. So you've got investors investing in a number of homes themselves, or they could be investing in an EB5 project that's developing, that's constructing real estate. From your experience, from what you have seen, do these investors that are investing in real estate, do they do any due diligence by hiring other companies to help them make these investment decisions?
Oh, interesting question. In my opinion, there's many kind of investors, and depending on the amount invested as well. So if the investment is coming from a personal person investing in a house or some properties, there's no due diligence. There is a personal knowledge and some information that the investor could take from the property consultant. If we talk about bigger investments coming from family offices, kind of big real estate projects, yes, there is some due diligence done by those family offices in coordination with some local companies to really understand what are the real benefits or gain, because there is a taxation system in the US. You have to know exactly how what is the net profit, because there's you don't have to be confused about the profit. At the end you have to see how much have you gained after those money get out from the US, because it's a different issue if you keep them in the US and reinvest them, or you put them again out and return them to the main source. So some studies and some explanation should be done when the amounts are bigger and coming from family offices. For sure those studies are being made, but in a lower scale, mainly those are done based on property consultants' opinion and advices. In any cases, I'd like as well to say to our listeners that they can add me on the social media. I'm present everywhere for any question they have about global real estate. I'm present on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram is WALIDM0USSA. It's a 0, not O. So I'll be answering all their questions concerning international investments.
Yeah, well, we're going to come back to you because I want to ask you about, as an example, you're based in Beirut. There's a lot of, very large real estate development companies in Lebanon, as an example, that may be looking to other countries to invest. They may, individuals from Lebanon may be looking to other countries to invest, right? Very wealthy country, but at the same time, that's just an example from what you've seen, whether it's from Lebanon or from the Middle East. Before we go back to Walid, we're looking at, again, the high net worth individuals, as we said, may be investing in real estate as an investment and using those assets to generate an income, and that income can be used for the amount that's required for the EB5 investment or for the E2 investment. But besides real estate, you've got now in this world that we're living in, where they may want to, instead of investing at risk in businesses to start off with, the first step, maybe we just talked about investing in real estate first, right? Whether it's real estate in Europe, the Middle East, the UK, Australia, investing in real estate anywhere, and the US, and using that real estate as a first step to generate income, which means, or an amount of money coming out of that real estate, like a mortgage, for example, to use that money to invest in an E2 project or an EB5 project or even L1. But the other strategy is that they can invest in wealth management products. They can go to a bank or a financial institution, say, we want to invest in money market accounts, we want to invest in bonds, etc. And then when they put their cash, could be 2 million, 3 million, in these wealth management products, right? Then they can borrow against these wealth management products, just like in real estate, and then use that money for the E2 or EB5 investment. And then these wealth management products are still intact, where it generates a certain amount of return as well. So Laura, if someone says, look, we want to invest in real estate, or we want to invest in wealth management products, again, in your opinion, the due diligence, they still need to go to professionals to advise them of the best products that they can invest in to achieve ultimately a result where they could take money out and then put into E2 or EB5 products, or even L1 products.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that some amount of due diligence and some amount of guidance should be provided for any kind of transaction that you're doing like that, whether it be real estate valuation, whether it be opinions on the viability of an investment. Regardless of what the person is looking to do, some amount of guidance should originate from an expert that really knows and has experience based on the valuation and things like that. Because you wouldn't want to walk into any kind of investment like that blind. And so I definitely think it's worthwhile to seek guidance and due diligence on those sorts of investments as well.
Okay, so what we're going to do, and I'm still asking Byron, I don't know if Byron's still there, Byron Sutton, I think we lost him, but he would have been very valuable for to comment on some of these issues. But what we're going to do now, and basically if, Bruno, if we could go to slide 10, because we want to leave room for questions and answers. But if we could go to slide 10, thank you. So the final word, you know, and I'll start off with Bob, and Waleed, and then Laura. The final word, Bob, is that we've talked about the strength of the US economy and the legal infrastructures to allow a foreign national to make an informed decision to invest in either an EB5, E2, or L1. So they can obtain either temporary or permanent residency. We've talked about that. But, you know, as we move forward towards the end of 2020 and 2021, I still hear from our clients that they still want to come to the US. So, Bob, what type of assurances would you be able to suggest that would allow high net worth individuals, foreign national investors, to make that decision that US could be a #1 destination to invest and to live?
Well, I mean, as I said at the beginning, the US is the largest economy in the world, and from a transparency standpoint, you know, we're based on a very strong legal system which protects investors. If the investor has their own family office, as Waleed suggested, and they're high net worth individual, they have good advisors around them, but then it's important that they connect with advisors in the United States that have a credible track record history. We recommend that when people consider EB5, they look very hard at the history of the regional center they're investing with, what their track record is, and bring together the right advisors to make sure they make an informed decision. We also work with a number of the large banks in the world here, JP Morgan Chase, and one of our lead banks. So as you suggested, and a first step many times for high net worth individuals is to invest in a money market fund or some kind of a product that meets the family office or the high net worth individual's objectives to protect their capital and grow it. And once that money is placed in the United States, then, as you said, they can obtain mortgage loans to do whatever they want to do, which gives them a foot into the United States, generates income for them, and then gives them a little bit of time perhaps to make that right decision on where they're going to invest, if it's E2 or EB5. So everything you've talked about, Laura, BDO, people like BDO, and certainly BDO is one of the leaders in the world, making sure that you're working with good people, good attorneys like yourself, and then take your time and look at it hard and make an informed decision.
Good, thank you, Bob. Waleed, you know, I visited you in Beirut in June of last year, and you know, you were very, you know, welcoming, and your staff were wonderful. And then I visited Byblos, which is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, 6,000 years, standing on land and a city that's still intact, basically, doing business for 6,000 years in trade and investment. Waleed, you know, we're not, and of course, we're dealing with high net worth individuals from every country, but you know, you're in an area, for example, as an example, where people have been doing business and trade and investment for years, right? Years, thousands of years. So what do you know, why would someone, let's say from Lebanon, invest in the US? You know, what would attract them? Lebanese have been coming to the US for hundreds of years, right? And they've been going to Australia. My heritage is Lebanese, and they've been going to Australia since the 1880s, and Brazil and the US. Why would, as an example, people from Lebanon or the Middle East, why would they come to the US and invest?
Well, this is a very specific question. As for the Lebanese are very educated people and very ambitious people. And Lebanon is a very small country. There's no space for all those people to make money in only a small country. So they immigrate around the world in order to have a larger scale. And yes, I do agree with you that the biggest wealth are Lebanese, whether if you look in Australia, in the United States, in Mexico, there's a lot of huge wealth, Lebanese wealth. And I take example of Carlos Slim Hello in Mexico, a Lebanese friend that I know personally, that is one of the richest men in the world, and he is a Lebanese descendant from people that have that went to Mexico for new opportunities and better life. So this is a culture. Phoenicians are the traders, the oldest traders in the world, where they used to trade in all this area with the Egyptians and to sell many kind of product, and especially the wood, the Lebanese wood of the cedars. So this is a culture. Trading and doing business and making money is a culture. And Lebanon is a small country to fit everyone here, so they are obliged. I always say that, you know, there's a lot of country like the US. You have heavy industries. What we do export, and our industries are human beings, and we export people around the world to travel and to work and to make wealth and hopefully to come back to their home and put their money home. As per the region, yes, in the region, Lebanese are very influential, have a very important positions in the area, and they've been playing a big role managing companies or connecting the West and the East together and bringing investment in and out from the Arabic countries and GCC region. So yes, there is an important role from the Lebanese in connecting, let's say, and bringing investments to the US.
Thank you, Wally, very much. So basically, Laura, we're going to include you. Bruno would like to, you know, put forward some questions. You know, we need to hurry up because we're running out of time. Bruno, if you have any questions from the attendees that you would like to ask. I don't know if Bruno, can we hear you? Bruno? I can't hear you.
You know, when you're self-muted, it's really not very clever, is it? But,
okay, we're hurrying up because, yeah.
Absolutely. I've been monitoring the session, and we've received some really interesting questions.
Sure.
I want to put some of those to you now. Some are going to be really obvious, but some are interesting. So let me kick off with a question from Dean Alexander. And he asks, what is the potential viability of the reduction in the EB5 investment amount to less than $500,000, as apparently has been reported by Politico, that you know, sort of Pan-American news outlets? Is there any bit of truth on that?
Yeah, Bruno, there was a rumor last year that there was going to decrease less than 500,000, but I'll let Bob address that because it was a rumor. Correct, Bob?
Yeah, and that was actually, you know, you hear the term in the United States, fake news, a lot, and that was really kind of a crazy proposal that came out of one of the Senate offices from a junior staffer, thinking that that would be a great way to pump money into the United States, but it was never discussed anywhere other than in one office. So, but it did get out there, and it made grabbed a lot of attention. But there's absolutely no truth to it, and it'll never happen.
Yeah, and Bruno, just to comment very quickly, I know I just finished writing an article which was published in IIUSA magazine, where we're looking at the laws and the policies that allow for an EB5 investment. For example, a $200,000 investment, we can file the EB5 petition, and then under certain circumstances, the investor can pay the balance of the $700,000 if it's a $900,000 location in installments, right? So there's legal arguments that we can put forward. An EB5 investment can start off with a $200,000, $100,000 investment, pay the rest in installments, and there's a process that we can adopt that would be backed up by laws and policies that we could try to do that. Okay, thank you, bro.
All right, yeah, and I do suggest that the viewers, if you haven't seen that publication, go to the IIUSA website and download that. It's a really great magazine they've just published. I think it came out last week. Bob, is that right?
Bob?
Yes.
It came out last week, yeah.
Yes, and address that. And but thanks for raising the question, Bruno, because it kind of quickly spread all over the world. But the news magazine kind of explains what happened there.
It's interesting, yeah, that publications like Politico should really be doing their research more in depth. We expect better from those guys. Moving on, and there's a question from Sanu Payar, and he says, what is the advantage? And I'm going to just have to ask you to answer this in less than a minute, guys.
Sure.
What are the advantages of EB5 over the other investment immigration categories?
You're relying on developers, operators, managers that have the experience usually to operate the business. And Laura, very quickly, that's where due diligence comes in to make sure the EB5 developers have the expertise. Laura?
Yeah, certainly. Again, it just goes back to choosing the right advisors and making sure that who you're working with, they know what they're doing and you've done due diligence on them.
You know, if I real quick, Bruno, on that. So EB5 allows you to get a permanent green card and then citizenship if you so desire. The other categories allow you to come in the country under a visa and stay, and it can be renewed. So you could stay as long as you basically, but you do not gain permanent green card status and does not lead to citizenship.
All right. And then a comment from Ishmael Fernandez. He says 4 Republican senators have sent a letter to President Trump asking him to completely suspend the EB5 program. And I know that IIUSA, because I have it in front of me here, has written to all members of Congress asking them to permanently authorize EB5, given the unprecedented economic crisis that is just around the corner the world over. Let's be clear on this. I'm not singling out the United States. We have an upcoming economic crisis. Any comments on that?
Bob?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. So the United States politically is a very interesting place, and I think it's almost like a reality TV show every day. There's always a little bit of drama, and one of the advantages of free press, and everybody has their opinion and speaks it boldly. The letter from the senators did suggest a suspension, but that's a small faction. Really what they want is a reform in the program. They'd like to see a permanent reauthorization. They'd like to see some integrity reforms, which IIUSA actually supports very strongly. So it was kind of an interesting letter. We're working with those offices. So, it was a way to get the attention of the White House.
Yeah, and very quickly, Bruno, the permanent program, EB5 program, is permanent for a direct EB5, right? Direct, which means if an investor is putting money into a direct project, which means that it still can be an investor's project or managed by someone else, what keeps on getting extended is a regional center designation program that oversees the projects under a regional center. That keeps on getting extended. So as far as the EB5 direct program, it is permanent. And I think Bob and Waleed and Laura would, and even Byron would all agree that we could look at the current EB5 program take advantage of the program and try to make the current program work for the investor. Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, the letter from IIUSA to Congress is actually very clear on that in the first paragraph. It's the reauthorization of the EB5 Regional Center program, not the other, as you pointed out, and it was a fair point. Just sticking on EB5, then there's one more question, and then we'll probably wrap up with some closing comments and thoughts. What if high net worth individual investors can file EB5 petitions based on installments, right? Will there be an increase in interest on those investments?
I'll say let's start off with Waleed, Bob, and then Laura. Then I can, in a matter of comment. Waleed, do you want to answer that or pass on that? Okay, all right. So Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to get into the program. Ed's been a proponent of it. We'll see. I mean, I really don't know. I know that a lot of regional centers and a lot of projects might be a little uncomfortable with it. It's certainly a way to go. I'm not sure that it'll be a big part of the program, but it's an option.
Yeah. Laura?
Pass on that one.
Okay, but the only comment I make is that the laws and the policies allow an EB5 investment to be a capital contribution, and the way they define the laws and policies capital contribution is either through cash or a promissory note. So if there's an agreement, a promissory note between the investor and the business, and the investor says, look, I have these liquid assets, real estate, I have money market accounts, wealth management products, and then if the promissory note includes these liquid assets and the promissory note is secured by the liquid assets, then the promissory note will allow the business, EB5 business, to put a lien on these wealth management products of the real estate. So if there's a default in the payment schedule, the installments, well, then the project can go after all the liquid assets to make up the 900,000 or even 1.8 million. We have to deal with not just immigration lawyers, but lawyers that know creditors' rights to make sure the liens are enforceable, right? So it could work, as Bob said, for certain investors, right? So the investor that doesn't want to put $900,000 today to file their EB5 petition, they could go with a smaller deposit. It's not for everyone, it's for some investors and some projects.
All right. Look, this is interesting because we have more attendees now than we had at the beginning of this webinar. So I don't know if people have been telling their friends how good you guys are, but there are more people. So I suggest we continue and we launch the poll, which kind of moves the discussion on quite nicely in terms of it's going to look at due diligence. So I'm going to launch a poll for our audience viewers and give them 5 seconds to answer that. And then Ed, can you lead a discussion?
On this point?
Yeah, on that point.
Yeah, sure. I think that, when an investor invests, let's say, for example.
Let's wait for the results.
Okay, I'm sorry.
They're still coming in.
Okay.
Here we go. All right, I'm going to share the results of that. So 83% of the pollsters agree that an independent third-party provider should be responsible. 17% think the investor, and nobody thinks the project should be responsible on that. So let me hide that. And Ed, delighted to, to hand the floor back to you on this.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick, then I'll pass it to Bob and Laura. I don't know where, well, he disappeared to, or Byron. But look, an investor is investing in EB5 or even E2. And they're going to say, well, we need to do due diligence, as we talked about, on the project. Okay, so they can hire an investment advisor or an accounting firm, etc., to say, am I investing in the right type of business? Bob, for example, may say, well, look, I've got a project and I want to assure my investors that the money's going to be invested in a viable project, right? And then there's a business plan and there's an economic analysis to say that the investment is going to create the jobs. Then there are companies, escrow companies or other third-party companies that can say to the investor, well, we will keep track of your money going into the project and making sure that the money does reach the project, the job creating entity, for example, and is used in accordance and complying with the business plan and economic report. Who should be responsible? Well, the investor, I believe, should be taking care of due diligence. The project may hire third-party, basically companies that will track the movement of the investment funds. So basically, the third-party companies aren't just going to appear and say, well, we're willing to do this. Of course, these are companies that need to get paid. Those are my initial thoughts. Bob, and then Laura, and then Wally. Bob?
Yes, and due diligence is really important. And we've interacted, we've raised money out of 44 different countries, and I travel and speak around the world, and I always give the same message. The program was developed by the US government in 1990 and then amended in 92 with the thought that if people would like to think like an American entrepreneur does and creates jobs and recognizes the money's at risk like all entrepreneurs do in the United States and around the world in their respective markets, then they'll gain access to the country and obtain a permanent green card and then citizenship if they so desire. But at risk is a really important part. So, what we recommend people to do is look hard at all the regional centers, and there are a lot of really good ones in the United States that have a track record and have delivered for their clients. When you look at a project, they should look at the attorneys that are involved in the base documents, the immigration attorneys like Ed Beshara, who have a track record of successfully helping people gain what they want from a residency standpoint and have capital returned over a period of time. So we encourage people to look at multiple projects, look at the principals, look at the attorneys that are involved, because the attorney part, the legal part, is extremely important to the success of the project. Also, who's doing the accounting work, the third-party evaluations, all the good regional centers have all that. But then if they really want to go in depth, if they have a home office, a private wealth office, that's terrific. You have professionals, but then maybe even get a third party that's unbiased to take a look at a number of different projects. People like different parts of the country, people like different types of projects. All that's considered when somebody makes an investment, but they should take their time and be very careful. But I always say history repeats itself. So find somebody that has a track record, and those are the people they should consider put at the top of the list.
Good, thank you, Bob. Laura, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, part of it goes towards someone's risk appetite. I think best practice would say investors should be hiring a third party. They should be doing in-depth, regardless of someone's track record. You don't know on the surface what lies beneath. But I do think, that's not always realistic. And as Bob said, in a lot of ways, there's things that they could rely on that are in the public sphere that are accessible to them as investors that would not necessarily require hiring a third party. So certainly it depends on the risk appetite, but at every step and every part of the process and every party involved has some responsibility to take on a little bit of the due diligence at least.
Yeah, to protect the investor, they need, for example, a third-party company to make sure, right, that the investment funds are being used exactly in accordance to the business plan and economic, because the way that they're able to get their green card, their permanent residency, is showing job creation, because the investment in the business creates the jobs. And unless they can make sure there's compliance, then they may not get the green card if the project doesn't use those funds according to the business plan. Wally, do you want to comment about whether this is important, or the third-party due diligence? Or
Oh yeah, I do agree that it's very important to have a third-party due diligence to protect your investment and guarantee the result that you have to get out of this investment. You're a foreigner coming from outside the country, entering a country, especially in the United States. There's a lot of regulations and a lot of changes that can happen from day to another. And now, especially after what's happening, a lot of regulation will be changing, and a lot of new amendments will be popping up. So I'm convinced, and I do advise every investor to have a third-party due diligence in order to secure and maximize his investment.
good, thank you, Wally. Thank you, Bruno.
All right, any closing comments, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, I think we'll be very brief. Bob, again, how do we show that the US is open for business? EB5, E2s, you have E2 businesses, correct, that you can probably advise, probably comment on?
Yes, I mean, we're definitely open for business, and we haven't stopped working at FirstPathway Partners during this whole thing. Some of our staff are working remotely, but contact FirstPathway Partners, and we appreciate the opportunity to participate in this. And Bruno, a pleasure to see you again. We were supposed to be together in a couple of weeks here in Brussels, but hopefully that'll be moved to the fall successfully. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody in the panel and to address the audience.
And Bob, congratulations again on continuing to be president of IIUSA.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, Laura.
No, I think this has been a great panel. I think EB5 has less traditional due diligence as we would see in the rest of the industry, and I think there's a place for due diligence in all parts of the EB5 spectrum. And so I just think, if there's ever questions about due diligence, you can approach really reputable third-party firms like BDO, and we'd be happy to consult on what best practice looks like for this industry.
Good. And Waleed?
Well, yeah, I think that was a very informative webinar, and I think that people need to always to have more and more information about procedure and how that kind of investment, or what are the procedures that can be done in order to invest in the US and benefit from the different program, like the different EB program that you have. I'm convinced that we always should rely on professionals in order to have good results. Thank you, Edward, for putting us on this panel. I hope we were able to explain whatever was needed. And as I mentioned before, if you have any other questions concerning the global real estate investment, international markets, whatever, you can find me on social media. I'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you, Edward.
Thank you, Waleed. And I wanted to finally say, Bruno, look, you've done a great job in helping us with this webinar. It's been very, I believe, useful. If people realize that EB5 is definitely a way to go to invest in the US to obtain residency, and then, of course, as Bob said, leads to US citizenship. But also, when Bruno and I before were talking about high net worth individuals moving to the US, as well as foreign companies, and it's not just EB5, it's L1, E2s, all these other types of opportunities for people to come into the US, and they may come into the US under an L or an E, to still having the wish to go and invest in EB5, because while they're here in a matter of months, staying in the US under an E2 or an L1, they can still invest in EB5, which may take another couple of years before they can get their residency. If people forget EB5, employment-based category 5, all that they have to do, Bruno, is think of my name, Edward Beshara, EB, I was born on the 5th, and the number of our building is 555. So, you know, you can relate to EB5, but as Bob said, and Laura and Waleed, we're all available to answer any questions. We should act as a team. There should be a team effort in having professionals and organizations to work for the benefit of the investor. And it's not just working for the benefit of an investor, it's working for the benefit of the investor's family, Bruno. Family becomes very important.
And that's the wider subject. And I'm glad you mentioned that a little bit earlier on about the other options aside from EB5, because we'll be back tomorrow at 2:30 Central European Summertime, and I'll be speaking with Chad Ellsworth, who's a partner for Fragaman worldwide, based in New York, and we'll be discussing, you know, global pandemics, entrepreneurs, investors who are increasingly looking to leverage the United States and other entrepreneurial and investor immigration programs as an insurance policy to diversify their business opportunities and residency during this, you know, worldwide economic downturn. But in the meantime, I want to thank Ed, Laura, Bob, and Waleed. I was looking forward very much to being in Washington a little bit later on in May for the IIUSA advocacy event. Unfortunately, of course, that has been postponed. Our own event in Brussels has also been postponed, but I think we'll, you know, hopefully soon be meeting up face to face. I hope the audience, the viewers, enjoyed today's session. There is in the webinar widget, as always, information about the IMC, information about our education and training product. We'll have a short video as I say goodbye, so please hang around for a couple of minutes on that. Until next time, thank you very much again to our panelists for joining us, and thank you to our viewers for all some really great questions and taking the time from your busy days to log in to this webinar. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Introducing the Certification in Investment Migration from the Investment Migration Council, the first structured learning product of its kind globally, designed for you. Explore the bite-sized learning pathway of each module on our custom online platform. You can track your progress as you go and learn at a pace that suits you, with an estimated 5 hours of study time per module. The Certification in Investment Migration contributes to the development of professional competencies and standards for those new to or already working in the industry. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our website to start your learning journey today.